But when they practice conscious parenting, they see that they are healing their own broken inner child, inner selves, and what a reparative process that is. And that's all we need to do as parents is heal your own wounds. The rest will happen beautifully.
Peace and riches blessings. I am Michael B. Beckwith, the host of Take Back Your Mind. Peace and radical blessings. And before we had this beautiful interview with Dr. Shefali, who has a number of books about conscious parenting that you're going to love, we always have a life question of the week. So this particular life question comes from Devon, from Daylesford, Australia. She says, I'm called to be an activist in the area of children's rights. Can you offer words to help me continue to remain compassionate towards all involved while being a witness to atrocities? My faithful line has been, only hurt people hurt people. But it doesn't seem to work for me when it comes to repeat offenders and being the mother of a beautiful 9-year-old. This all feels too close to home. What insight can you provide me? You are what we call a sacred activist. Sacred activist. Sacred means that you're holding a space of the possibility of right action, the possibility of an answer, the possibility of a new way of being for our world, our society, our nation, and for people who are involved with what you're calling atrocities. So that means you're holding a vision. And you're an activist, which means you are using your time, your thought, your word, and your action to actually be about something, whether it is protest, whether it is education, whatever is your particular way of dealing with this particular issue. Now, in terms of how to remain compassionate, that emerges from your ability to see what you're working for, but to feel that it's already happening. So that you're not fighting against something, you are using your energy to hold the frequency for something. Not against, but for. When you look at the great changes that have taken place on the planet, you look at the civil/human rights movement, and you can hear Dr. King, even under the face of bigotry and racism, speak about a beloved community, speak about all beings, regardless of race, color, culture, religion, etc., living together in what is called the world house. And so even though there was an activist aspect of voters' rights, civil rights, the dissolution of bigotry and racism and oppression, which was very hurtful and harmful and oppressive, there was a feeling of the possibility of a world that works for the highest and best within us all, vibrating within him. So as you're dealing with children's rights and the protection of children and the caretaking of children, etc., you're holding the frequency of that. What does that look like? What does that vision look like if our children were safe and protected in our society? What does that look like? So you're holding the frequency of that, wow, and that frequency is compelling you into action. So as you're nurturing that frequency through spiritual practice, then you don't find yourself getting too burnt out fighting against what you don't like, and the people whose emotional, mental, spiritual immaturity is a part of the problem. You're not fighting against the people. You're fighting for something that's trying to emerge. You're fighting for something. So that the only thing that you're really fighting against, if I can use that language right now, is ignorance. Not a person and not people. It's ignorance that's captured the people's hearts and minds. So catch what I'm saying. You are a sacred activist. You're holding a vision of possibility. You're cultivating the feeling of that possibility that feeds you and then compels you into right action. So your energy is for safety, for wellness, for well-being of the children, not just against bad people doing bad things. So as you're holding that frequency, then you become a midwife and a birthplace of the next great spiritual impulsion of children's rights and children's safety. I hope this assists you. We'll be right back with Dr. Shefali. Peace and blessings, everyone. As you know, I'm Michael B. Beckwith, founder of Agape International, and this is the podcast, Take Back Your Mind, where we become increasingly aware that oftentimes the mind is hijacked by worry and fear and a deep sense of separation from the great presence of love and beauty and intelligence that surrounds us, cradles us, and is our very life and being. So we have the wherewithal within us to actually take back our mind from external programmings so the mind can be an avenue of truth and awareness, an avenue of inspiration. So I have with me today Dr. Shefali. Now, many of you already know who she is, but I'll give you a brief update in case you do not. Clinical psychologist specializing in the integration of Western psychology and Eastern philosophy, bringing together the best of both worlds for the clients, for her clients, and for the world. She's an expert in family dynamics and personal development, teaching courses all around the globe. She's written 5 books, 3 or 4 of them, which is the New York Times bestsellers, including 2 landmark books, The Conscious Parent, The Awakened Family. Her website, drshefali.com, SHEFALI.com, features a wealth of resources and offerings on conscious parenting and mindful living, and also she has a private practice where she consults with couples and with families. Welcome to Take Back Your Mind, Shefali.
Thank you. Give me back my mind.
We got to take it back. We can't have society running amok with our mind. It's very dangerous. And then your latest book is The Parenting Trap. Excuse me, Parenting Map. Freudian slip.
It is a trap. It's a map out of the trap.
Right. And then you have the one about a radical awakening as well, which is very, very powerful, which I think I think that's where you live, and that you have this very powerful niche of parenting. Now, in your first 2 books, you really open people up to conscious parenting. People have been very unconscious around that, but you burst on the scene and shifted the whole conversation. Just give us a brief summary of those first 2 books, because, Oprah really loved it, and that introduced you to a whole larger audience, and now people know you, around that particular dynamic.
Yeah, so when I first stumbled upon the whole philosophy of conscious parenting, I was really a new mother myself and pretty shocked that this wasn't mainstream. So the mainstream traditional parenting model in place when you and I were parents was one mainly indoctrinated in fear, shame, parental hierarchy, and dominance. And when I became a mother and began practicing according to what I was ingrained with, I realized that I didn't like being that kind of mother. But that's all I knew. No one had told me that there was another way to parent. I just thought I need to know best. I should know best. I should be in control. And oh my goodness, when I saw that I had 0 control, automatically, because the modeling had been such, I presumed that it was my child who was at fault, and I had to fix the child. So then I would yell, scream, shame, humiliate, all the good things that we were all raised with, and I didn't feel good about it. And that's when I had an epiphany about, wow, this ego called the parental ego is not talked about. And it's the ego that's in motion and domination, not parental love or consciousness. And then I broke through with this model called the conscious parenting model, which really demands and obligates the parent to look at their own crap and to see how they are mired in childhood conditioning, that they are simply robotically regurgitating. And that's what is quote unquote bad. And that's what needs to be fixed and healed, not the child. By then I had already quote unquote damaged my child, but at least I used her as a muse to understand the plague of our existence, which really is birth in this dysfunctional modeling that parents are ingrained with. And unless we revolutionize that early childhood bond, we will continue to suffer as we have and have destroyed the earth as a result of it, because the original earth, the mother wound, is what comes through the womb. And unless we heal that through both parents, father and mother, the child will grow forth with this deep inner schism and separation, which they will then project onto the world.
Right. I really love the way you're breaking that down. So what we're saying to parents right now is, in essence, oftentimes the child is just feeding back to us our own unresolved issues that we're projecting onto them, and then they live those out. They become imprinted by our unconsciousness, and they live that out, and then we reach out and try to change them without looking in and doing the work necessary to clear ourselves of the trauma, the drama, the schism, so that it doesn't become just an endless loop of each generation carrying the sins of the parents and the grandparents and the great-grandparents. So that you're having people take responsibility.
Right. It is such a sinister conditioning in the traditional parenting model, which says right from the start that we are here to control these children. Children should obey us. Children should. So the onus is already with the finger pointing outward. And we know when we point the finger outward, we constantly abnegate self-accountability. And so the entire parental model, the old model, is based on abnegation of parental accountability. And we look at these children as these puppets to be, controlled, to be dominated, to be curated into our fancy, into our fantasy. So just then, imagine the child is cut off from their essence. The first big divide occurs in the mind of the parent toward the child. The child is not raised in alignment with their essence. They are raised in alignment with the parent's broken self. And from the parent's broken self comes these manufactured, curated fantasies that the parent is unaware of. And they indoctrinate the child to meet those fantasies. So the child never gets a chance to follow their own inner alignment. So of course they're separated. And of course they're objectified by the parent. And of course then they will objectify themselves and others. And this is why we can destroy relationships, destroy animals and the earth, because it was done to us. In fact, we don't even believe we're destroying anyone, and we don't believe we are destroyed.
Right. I like that word fantasy because I often use it myself in terms of when I deal with adults, I have to help them break away from the parental fantasy, the fantasy that their parents had about them that they're trying to live up to without touching their own essence, their own destiny, their own calling. They are unconsciously trying to live out a parental fantasy that has nothing to do with them. Their parent was the vehicle by which brought them into this world. But other than that, we have to go within and discover what our calling is. Why did we come to the planet? What are our gifts, talents, and capacities that we are to develop? So we end up, dealing with adults who have been, as you say, curated by the parental fantasy, and then we have to take them as adults and help them break free from all of that. And oftentimes, adults feel guilty when they start to stray away from the parental fantasy. They think they're doing something wrong, when in fact, they're answering their soul call into their own destiny, their own greatness. Now, one of the things that you say is that the parental anxiety is rooted in fear. Break that down to a degree.
Well, so it's so generational and so cyclical that it's hard to know where to break the cause and effect chain, right? So because we have been raised by our parents according to their fantasies and fear, we now are mired and bathed in anxiety because we've been cut off from our essence. So we have been so used and abused that now we use and abuse others, all the while looking for that self-worth and self-honor. So that fear is really off stepping in to who we are as we are and claiming that good enoughness, right? So because our parents, so I'll just take it, say a mother raises a child, because she's filled, and I'm only using the mother, but not to say it's not the father, I'm just using her as an example. If she is raised and bathed in not good enoughness and afraid to step into her own ordinary extraordinariness, she now will use the child to fulfill her emptiness, her lack, her void. So the child becomes an instrument. So that anxiety gets translated straight into the child. The child then feels used and abused, but doesn't know how to get out and uses and abuses other people. So we're just this endless maniacal feeding, foraging system, one upon the other, not knowing how to break the pattern. And ultimately, the fear is to be in our essence, which is extraordinary, but in its ordinariness. We are so looking for this greatness, which is manufactured, right? Greatness according to what culture says, how we look, how many cars we have, how many ornaments and jewelry and friends and social circles we belong to. We are trying to claim ordinariness through these external means, never really claiming the ordinary essence. The ordinary essence, so ordinary, is so extraordinary. And that's the irony. It's right here within us, but that terrifies us because we've been told it should look like the straight A's, the Ivy League education, the money in the bank account, the ideal hourglass figure, the person we marry, right? So obviously then when we're told it should look so fancy, then inner stillness and the inner home looks so banal compared to that.
Yeah, I like extraordinary. It's actually like extraordinary. It's extraordinary. It's simple. It's natural. You're in a flow of that which is of the earth, that which is of God, that which is of love. It's, I used to say things like, people try to do so much. It's like putting mags on a Rolls Royce. You know what I mean? You put all these ornaments on it and all these cosmetics, but it's not necessary. So we're talking about being extraordinary. It's a flow without all of the attachments.
Right. Parents find the word ordinary or average such a bad, dirty word. Like when I say to them, it's okay if your child is average, oh my goodness, they fire me on the spot. They're like, are you talking about my child? My child is not average. And what I'm trying to get them to is to be okay with our limitations, right? Who said we have to be supersonic, perfect, extra special? I say you're unique, but you ain't that special.
No, I like that. I like that because we're all unique, but there aren't any special people.
Nobody's special.
The universe didn't burst up out to special people, but the universe did birth uniqueness.
We are unique, and that should be enough. But no, it's not enough. We have to be extra special, and we're all looking for that specialness because as children, we were told that who we are as we are was not enough, right? So now we're adding, and you and I know that true stepping into power is a subtractive process, not an additive.
Yes.
It's not additive, it's subtractive. And when we release the additions, we actually find it so simple that there was nothing to do after all this. And people on their deathbed or when they face a terminal illness, they realize these wisdoms. But why do we have to wait for this big traumatic, end of life to discover the most basic truths, that we are okay as we are, only when we realize that we are so ordinary.
Absolutely, and you're right. I was just working with somebody that's very very close to me in my family right now who uh, came with a diagnosis, life-threatening diagnosis, and he's suddenly become the person we always thought he could be. You know, in terms of his communication, in terms of his openness, in terms of his generosity, in terms of his gratitude for the friends that are around him, and it's like he got this new lease on life, and he's suddenly blooming. But he waited until, you know, he got this diagnosis, and then suddenly or incrementally it forced him. But as you say, many people, that's how they do it. And what we're telling people is you don't have to wait for a diagnosis or a crisis. I mean, human beings grow through crisis or through insight. And I think your teaching, your books provide the context for people to grow through insight. They don't have to wait for a crisis. They can actually grow as a way of living. And then the psychological damage we do to our children can be lessened, because oftentimes, and I think you brought this up a little bit, the child feels less than because they're not measuring up to some fantasy. And then they're trying to, psychologically, they're trying to fill a hole that's not really there. And that's when they do all the additions, all the cosmetics on this beautiful consciousness that's not going to add anything to themselves. It'll just be something they have to subtract later. Yeah.
Right. So the entire field of pop psychology and positive motivation is all about find your worth and, claim it. And so we know what they're saying, but really there's nothing to find. This whole idea of worth was birthed because it was taken away from us. It was there, and it is still there. It's just covered up in the falsity of this false quest. There's nothing to find. It's right inside us, and we keep trying to find it through the relationship, through the next career, through the next big whatever breakthrough. But that will be transient, because actually it's only in the coming back home to the stillness within that we realize there was no fight, there was no battle to win, no war to conquer, no territory to forage. It was just right here.
Right. And this is why we say all spiritual growth, development, and unfoldment is about elimination of something. The as you said, the subtraction of something that's been added, that's creating an impediment in our perception to see that we're all right already. And so yes, we're letting go of something, not adding something. I remember the teachings of Jesus that said, who by taking thought could add 1 cubit to their stature, and I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, but that's a powerful statement. Who by taking thought can add anything to ourselves. We can't add anything to our uniqueness. Yes. It's already, we have to just become aware of it through the deep stillness and then live it fully. Now, right, what are some of the other myths that people have about parenting that are commonplace, that just kind of run us unconsciously?
Okay, so the most basic one is that they think they have to produce this child in a produced childhood. So we have to piano lessons and baseball lessons and skiing backwards and hanging from ropes and learning 10 languages. And so parents come to me and go, but I have to expose my child. Are you saying, Dr. Shefali, I shouldn't expose my child? And then when I ask them, well, what if your child is the best scuba diver, but only in the climactic waters of the Maldives? Should we go there now? Like, should we go move to the Maldives? Or what if your child is only the best skier, but only on the powdered snow of the Tibetan Alps or whatever mountains are in Tibet? Should we go there? Like, what are we trying to expose them to? And then they say, it's not exposure to the activity. The parent wants them to be exposed to a pinnacle of achievement to make the parent feel whole. There is no such thing as exposure, because life is exposure. Right here, right now is exposure. The child playing in the backyard is exposure. But we don't care about real exposure. That's just how parents couch it, because culture has told us, expose your children, right? Take them to the Metropolitan Museum of Fine Art. And so the poor parent in Guatemala is like, oh my goodness, I need to move to New York and go to this museum because I'm not exposing my child.
And they may have a beautiful garden in their backyard.
And they're just fine. And I always say, I tell this story of this parent who called me from Disney World. So all of this quest is for achievement and success and happiness. So this parent called me from Disney World. She had booked this concierge trip. It was private and amazing and so expensive, and she was so excited. And so she called me within a few hours of getting there, and I said, what's wrong? She was very agitated, and she said, my children are just so ridiculous. They're so ungrateful. I was like, oh my goodness, these monster children, tell me, what are they doing? And she said, they're just playing in the swimming pool in the hotel. They don't want to go to Disney World. I said, oh my goodness, what horrid children you have. You're in the happiest place on earth, and they're not being happy in the happiest place. They're being happy in the swimming pool. I said, take them out of the bloody swimming pool, yell at them, put them in their clothes, take them to Disney World right now and tell them, don't you dare be happy anywhere else. Be happy in Disney World. Of course, she totally got confused. She didn't see the irony of what I was saying.
She didn't get it, huh?
She didn't get it. She was like, okay, I'm going to go and get them out of the swimming pool. I said, you go get them out of the swimming pool.
She took you too literally.
But this is our thing. We're so silly, we parents. We're like, we keep taking them out of their happiness and out of their greatest success. They are successful right here, right now. And we take them to another place and say, okay, now be happy here and be successful here, because I think that's how it should look. I'm going to take you to the beach so you can be happy there. And the child is, but I'm happy here in the kitchen. And you're like, no, we have to go to the beach and be exposed to the waves. So in all sorts of ways, we're kind of crazy. And it's so sad. It's not to put parents down, because I was that crazy parent, spending all this money, doing all these extra things, when the child was actually calling me to let them be who they are. So it's now, and then when I say this to parents, of course, then the next retort is, oh, so why don't I just give them alcohol? Why don't I just give them drugs? So just because I tell parents to not be crazy, delusional, controlling, they go to the other extreme of drugs, sex, and rock and roll, right? They're like, okay, I'll just smoke pot with them then. And so I tell parents, it's not this extreme reaction. It's about attuning, taking your child's lead and following what they are natural at, and then allowing them to blossom. But if a child strums their fingers on a desktop, please don't buy them a drum set. It's okay if they're just strumming their fingers. If the child is twirling in the bathroom, please don't put them in a ballerina tutu. It's okay to just let the freaking child be a child. So we're so uncomfortable with childhood because it was robbed from us.
But you know what you're touching upon too, to a degree. We look at individuals now who have achieved a pinnacle of their parental fantasy, great gymnasts, great athletes, whatever, and then they have kind of a mental breakdown. It's a trend right now for people to come out after achieving something that the world would say is very successful, and they talk about their emotional trauma. They talk about their mental breakdown, that they've achieved this great thing, but they're bereft of a sense of joy about it, a sense of happiness. They've done what they thought they should do as a kid, becoming disciplined and growing and achieving this great thing, and then they finally get there, and it's in many places it's empty. I remember a number of years ago, the Super Bowl had just been won, and they forgot to turn off the mic. And when the quarterback walked into the locker room, he said, "Is this all there is?" He was supposed to say, "We're supposed to go to Disneyland. We won the Super Bowl." But the mic was still on, and he said, Is this it? This is all there is?" So you see these, and we're not putting down achievements. We're not putting down individuals who excel at whatever it is they excel at. But when it's done at the cost of your soul, or this is the thing, without the development of that sense of self-love and appreciation, and you're already all right, then individuals then have to struggle to get their sanity back. And this happens in all walks of life. I mean, both of us counsel people who have been very high achievers, and then end up almost suicidal because they followed some fantasy that society says you're not good enough unless you have all these zeros behind the numbers in your bank account, unless you have all of these awards, unless you have all these degrees. And what we're saying and what you're emphasizing is that there's an all rightness already here. It has nothing to do with the world.
Right. And most of these successful, driven athletes and superstars, many times it's because a parent has had an agenda, right? If you see the Tiger Woods story, the parent had a plan. If you see the Williams story, the parent had a plan. Agassi talks about his father. It's an agenda. And of course, the child has talent. But almost, if you're consciously parenting, you actually don't push the child beyond their current day childhood. Childhood is a sacred stage of life. And those achievements that we're talking about are really for adults. But the way we've constructed achievements and to go to the Olympics, you have to be robbed of childhood to get there. So the whole institution of the Olympics or such success is anti-childhood, because children are not to be trained to become world star athletes. Who said that is great? And of course, we spectators love it, but at what cost to the child? Childhood is such a fervent place of imagination, spontaneity, creativity, restlessness, boredom, stillness, play. So if you're raising a Tiger Woods, there is no play. And if you watch his biography, there was no play. There is no such thing.
He played later. after he had his pinnacle success, he played a lot.
But you understand that at that point when you play, of course it's going to look like that. Because it's years of repression. Of course you're going to act out. There is I have not met a single super successful person who had it young especially, whose childhood was robbed, that did not act out and the body did not break down in some way. There has to be a cost to that. And so as a parent, you have to ask yourself, do I really need an Olympic star or a Wimbledon star or a PGA athlete in order to feel worthy as a parent? And we have to check ourselves. And the traditional model doesn't check the parent, you see. The parent is the only job in the world, unlicensed, unsupervised, no continuing ed, no mental status questionnaire to be taken, except two horny adults, right? That's it. That's all it takes. And biology is easy that way. But just because we can biologically produce a child doesn't mean we're psychologically equipped to do so.
Right. Absolutely. Two things. One, I like your phrase, the sacred stage of childhood. I think that needs to be emphasized because, as you're describing, so many parents are gearing their child to the future, but they're not honoring this sacred stage of childhood. I can remember a teacher talking about a father that came home and he saw his daughter in the backyard and she was playing with the snake. The mother was seeing the daughter play with the snake, and when the father walked into the kitchen, he saw the mother, her face was like really nervous, and he said, "What's wrong?" And they looked outside, and the baby, it's a little girl, she's just playing with the snake, and the mother's frightened, and the father said, "Don't scare her. Let her stay in Eden for just a little while longer. She doesn't know to be afraid of a snake. She doesn't know that. And the snake's just playing with her, But there's a sacred stage that we have to honor of childhood. And you're emphasizing that, whereas oftentimes as parents, we're already thinking about when they're 19 and 20, and hopefully when they're 30, they'll have their retirement money, and 40, and they have their bank account, they're able to retire there, But we're not honoring the sacred stage of childhood, which is sacred. It's beautiful.
It is so powerful, that stage, and it's the only stage in life that can remain untouched, but we have so tainted it and corrupted it already because we're living in the future, because we're not raising children, we're raising adults, right?
I like that. We're not raising children, we're raising adults with a child body. That's great.
There's a whole movement to raise adults, right? People will say, I'm not raising a child, I'm raising an adult. No, you're raising a child. A child has a different brain, has different needs, and a different language. And a child's language is play, and a child's language is moment by moment presence. And because we don't know how to play, and we're not in the present moment, we're uncomfortable with that. And a child's language is feelings. All these things are stripped from us as adults. And that's why when a child is in the moment, when a child is playing, I have adults coming to me telling me, Dr. Shefali, I'm sorry, I cannot play with my child. And I said, that's why your child is your teacher. You need to reclaim your playfulness. That is the most beautiful part of our essence, and we've lost it. We don't play anymore. But that is the child's work, is play.
I like that. Wait a minute. Let's not let that lose that phrase right there. That's the child's work, is to play.
So they're working very hard. So why are we bothering them, right? Whenever I ask my daughter, what are you doing? She'll say, I'm very busy. So I say, okay, what are you doing? Being busy? And she's like, resting. And I often want to laugh at her, but I go, wow, she's just honoring the fact that she's resting, and she's very busy resting. But why aren't we busy resting anymore? Why has that become such a bad thing, right? And my adult ego wants to tell her, oh my goodness, you're so lazy. But I catch myself and I go, wow, I should learn to be busy resting a little bit more. Maybe I'll stop harming everyone around me as much if I just learn to be busy resting and shut the F up a little bit.
Right. Well, Oppenheimer was daydreaming, staring out the window, and I'm not totally in agreement with everything he invented, but they asked him, what are you doing? He said, I'm working. He's just staring.
And you and I know as writers, I don't know whether you experience this, but I think all artists do. A big part of writing is the bloody staring and the bloody just holding the pen over the paper blank and waiting and sitting and allowing and coagulating and fermenting. And the book gets written in the last part of that creative process. A large part of the creative process is simply tuning in, tapping in, and waiting for all the debris to be ironed out and culled out for then the creative stream to burst forth. And that's childhood. Childhood is that stage of the creative process. And we are marauding it, so quickly rushing to adulthood. And then by the time they reach that success in adulthood, like your football player or whatever athlete, they're burnt out, they're exhausted, and they're in mental decline.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're bringing up a lot of stuff. I was talking to somebody this week, and I'm going to do an intensive at the end of the week, and I said, well, I need this day off, and even though it doesn't look like I'm doing anything, my mind's preparing itself for what I have to do, and ideas would flow. I said, I don't need it filled up with things, and I don't need to schedule a thing where I'm going to put this thing together, but I just need to be free so that the process can happen. It'll look like I'm doing nothing, but I'm actually making myself available to the insights and what that particular audience will need from me on those particular days. So it looks like I'm doing nothing, but I'm actually playing in a larger field of consciousness. And it's extremely important. Yeah.
So why don't we, but we don't do that because again, it comes down to being comfortable, being still, being in the ordinary. So we are so afraid of turning the phone off, of not having a constant stream of visual stimulation and auditory stimulation. And that's why, in a way, and I only say it in this way, the pandemic was such a powerful potential for healing because we had to stay home. And that forced us to go back home. And to not go for the movies, not go to the shows. And yes, there was a lot of death and pain that came with it, but the good part of it was that it forced us to understand who we were just as we were without the noise of the outside world.
Yeah, the question that I had people ask during that time was, who do I really want to be when this particular experience is over? Rather than fighting against the experience and fighting against the lockdown of healthy people and fighting against everything, what do you want to be? Who do you want to become? And just allow that question to just be answered by your soul. What are you becoming during this particular time, so that when the experience is over, you've actually used that stillness and that solitude to actually be a fertile soil for the birth of more of you, just looks like you're doing nothing, just asking a question and allowing your soul to answer it. Let's talk about something else that confuses people as well, discipline. People want to know how to discipline their child. What do you say to them?
Well, the whole industry called parental discipline is a bloody farce and a sham, because it's just, when we talk about parental discipline, we talk about control, and we talk about arbitrary, tyrannical power over the child. Go to your room, sit on the naughty step. I'm going to take away your iPad that I gave you. I'm going to ground you. Just arbitrary bullshit that we have been talked to, that is, we've enshrined this thing called parental discipline, when actually there's no such thing. It should be the parent disciplining themselves, because we discipline the child because we're helpless, because the child has pulled down our underwear, really, and humiliated us and made us feel so out of control. And that out of control feeling is then translated into, I'm going to discipline you. We have to discipline those feelings that come up within us. That is the only thing that needs discipline. The child needs, sure, guidance and a tutelage, but only after we first have disciplined the rage we feel because the child has made us helpless, number one. And number two, after we have connected to the child. So conscious parenting's basic foundation is correction after connection. First connection. But we cannot connect to the child at all because we've been rendered helpless. And that old panic from our childhood, when we were rendered helpless and could not express ourselves, now we're like, by golly, we are going to express ourselves. So it comes out as rage, right? Just as the athletes who could never express themselves in true innocence, now that helplessness, which was never allowed to be expressed in its true essence as a child, now gets converted to acting out, to rage. And we call it parental discipline, but it is such a sham. And I wrote a book called Out of Control, Why Parental Discipline Doesn't Work and What Will. And it's out of control. We're trying to discipline out of control because we are out of control. And as long as we're operating out of controlness, it's just a lie. It's just violence, really. It's emotional abuse. And most parental discipline is arbitrary emotional abuse. I've seen myself do it. Each time I have raised my voice at my child, it's because I'm out of control from inside. And I could have handled it in 10 different ways. But because the parental model has told us, go ahead and control your child, I audaciously thought I could. And that's why I say parents need to be checked and really regulated. And conscious parenting checks parents. And that's why it's not so popular.
Right. Because the phrase you just used, which I think we want to bring back, is you connect, then you correct. It's because you're connecting to get yourself whole. And so you're not just having an outrageous moment of out of controlness. You're connecting first. And then from a sense of connection, whatever is appropriate then can emerge, not intermingled with your unresolved issues of your own childhood discipline that you may have had. And so, again, using some of the people that are big in the public, we look at a lot of these people acting out, and the commentators would say, well, he needs to grow up. He needs to stop acting like a child. Why is he doing that? Why is he saying that? Well, he didn't have a chance to do it when he was 3 years old, or when she was 5 years old or 7 years old. The discipline was on them so strong to become a successful adult that they never got a chance to be with their emotions, and never got a chance to express. They became an adult at 8.
So I always say that children only act out because of 3 reasons. Because their brain is not yet developed, so lack of skill. They genuinely don't have the skill to regulate themselves. Lack of practice, because they haven't lived long enough. And lack of worth. So if it's one of these things, then our anger, retaliation, and vitriol has no room, has no place. But because we were never honored and our voice was never heard. When our children institute their voice, or when they make a mistake, and because we were yelled at when we made mistakes, we cannot handle it. We literally fall apart. My child, I will say, has always been older than me in any given moment of my insanity. I have never been older than my 3-year-old. I've always been younger than her, or my 5-year-old. I've always acted worse than her because this is because my emotions were not regulated well enough as a child. And just honoring that doesn't make me a bad human. It makes me a human. And parents are so afraid to be human humans. Like we think, the minute I tell parents, it's your crap, can we look at it? They feel so offended because they have this idea of themselves that they need to be inhumanely human, and no one can be that, including superhuman, right? So that's why they can't handle this self-critique and turning the spotlight on themselves. But when they practice conscious parenting, they see that they are healing their own broken inner selves, and what a reparative process that is. And that's all we need to do as parents, is heal your own wounds. The rest will happen beautifully. Children don't need to be healed because they're not broken yet. And once we understand that, parenting becomes this beautiful synergistic partnership where we are not trying to make something out of anyone. We're trying to flow with who they are.
Absolutely. You're describing, in the realm of parenting, you're describing the power of meditation. Because when an adult, a parent, mother or father, observes themselves, just the fact that they're observing themselves begins to change the relationship between the emotions that are coming up and the perceptions that are coming up. Just the observation itself begins to change it at a subatomic level. So it stops running them because they're now observing it, and they enter into a transformational relationship with the energy that's coming up. So you're describing self-observation, self-critique, self-awareness in the realm of parenting. And this works your entire life when we just take responsibility for what's within us rather than projecting it way out there.
So then parenting can become the ultimate spiritual practice, especially parenting young children, because children are already gurus of the present moment. They're already right there where all our meditation practice needs to take us. Children embody that. So aligning with that from breastfeeding, when mothers complain about breastfeeding, I always try to reframe that as the most spiritual practice, because you don't need to say a word. It's nonverbal. It's communion. It's union. It's sharing. It's cooperation. It is the most symbiotic process of life. And all mothers are thinking about are their saggy breasts and getting breast implants. And I tell them, you're missing the most amazing point of this part of the journey, which is your spiritual growth, your spiritual union with something transcendent. Here you are, you were one person, you became two, and now you're one again, sharing milk. What an amazing process. But we're too busy going back to work and to the gym. And so we miss these moments that childhood offers us, this moment by moment presence, ordinariness, children just so happy playing with bugs and spiders. I mean, children are the only gurus, really. And we're missing that because we're making them adults.
Right, because they're right there in the moment. So, and you've covered a lot of material, but if there's one salient piece of advice you would give a parent, what would it be? I mean, you've covered a lot, so maybe you've already done it, but does anything bubble up when I ask you that question?
Well, I will say that if you can just hear me say this, that there are 3 lies about parenting, that if you could debunk for yourself, your children will grow up worthy, healthy, resilient. Number 1, you are not in control. The idea that you are in control is a lie. You're not in control. Let it go. Let it go. So if you're not in control, what are you? You are in flow. Flow with who? Flow with your child's essence. The second lie is that you're supposed to raise super perfect, super achieving children. Lie. That is not true. That has not been known to be the pathway to joy. No super successful person will say that that identity as that achieving person got them joy. Other things got them joy, not that. And the third lie is that you're supposed to raise happy children is a lie. Parents get so caught up thinking that they're supposed to make their children happy. No, they're supposed to just raise their children. That's it. To deal with whatever life experience their child brings forth. You're supposed to raise authentic children, children who are experiencing their life as it is. If we can debunk these 3 lies, now we can calm the hell down and begin to truly connect with who our children are. Because these 3 lies bring anxiety in us. We're supposed to be in control. We're supposed to raise super perfect children, achieving children, and happy children. These 3 lies put pressures on us and creates anxieties that we don't need to have.
Yeah, I'm reminding me, I have 2 adult children now, and they have what I call good hearts. They're good-hearted people. In their particular friends, they're the ones who bring good-heartedness, and people come to them for answers. I mean, they don't have all the answers, but they have a certain way of being in the world that I really, really appreciate. And I can remember when my daughter was a little girl, and she used to always argue with her mother about sitting in the front seat. She would race to the car whenever we were going somewhere, and she would jump in the front seat, lock the door, put on the seat belt, and keep her mother locked out. And her mother would say, "Michaela, open the door and get in the back seat. Why do we have to always go through this?" And so finally, Michaela opens the door. One day she opens the door, gets in the back seat, and she says, "From now on, this is the front seat." And she had that kind of consciousness. This is the front seat. And that's how she carried herself. Yes. I see it as if it was yesterday. This is the front seat. And it was so beautiful. And I can remember when I went to before Thich Nhat Hanh got really big, I went to his meditation retreats. It would just be 20 or 30 of us. And one day, I'm going to go on this retreat. And she's like 7 years old. And she says, "I want to go." I said, "You want to go on a meditation retreat with me?" She said, "Yes." I said, "There's going to be no talking. We're not going to talk. We're going to sit and meditate." And she says, "Yeah, I want to go." So she came with me. And, her mother was a little perplexed. "You want to go on a meditation retreat with your dad?" I said, "Yes." And she just sat there and meditated the whole 2 or 3 days we were together. So I'm thinking, you're making me think about them. My son, when he was a little boy, when he wanted to play basketball, he asked, "Is it legal to dunk in this league?" Now he's 3 feet tall. I said, "Yes, it's legal." Yeah, he and his boys slapped 5. I let them be who they wanted to be as best I could. And as you said, I would get the feedback when I was trying to put my stuff on them. But they were powerful enough to throw it back at me.
Yes. And we want to raise children who are powerful against our ego. When my daughter is defiant and fighting back at me, I love it. My ego doesn't love it, but I know that it's my ego that doesn't love it, not my essence. Children need to speak their minds and know their hearts and know their voice, even if that makes us uncomfortable. This is how they get to practice knowing who it is they are and embodying that in the world. But we get so threatened again because we were never allowed. So with compassion for ourselves as parents, we also need to call ourselves to a greater healing.
Absolutely. This has been fantastic. Let us know. I mean, I know you have, the parenting map out, and you also had another book. What's it called?
A Radical Awakening.
A Radical Awakening. Mm-hmm. What was your main point about that book?
A Radical Awakening was really for women to transform their pain into the greatest portal for power and step into their authenticity and strip themselves from the burdens of being the good girl, the perfect girl. So it was a song to my sisters, really.
Right, and for such a time as this, that is so necessary. Well, Shefali, it's been great being with you again, because I've been on your stage a few times, and we've been together. Any last words, and how can people find you?
Well, if people are interested in doing what I do with parents, I have a coaching institute for parents and for parents who want to help other parents. So I encourage people to check that out on my website. I have lots of courses, my Instagram, and my website is drshefali.com.
drshefali.com. It's been a pleasure being with you. Thank you for all the great work you're doing, and the work you're doing is necessary. God bless you. Thank you so much. Dynamic Blessings. This is our particular place in the program in which we get to practice. When you heard Dr. Shefali speak, she mentioned being still, being quiet, not being caught up in busyness, not doing a lot of things, in order to get a real sense of coherence around who we really are. She used the phrase connect and then correct. So there are aspects in our life experience that we want to correct. There are aspects in our life experience that we want to improve upon. We want to bring into manifestation, so to speak. But just to run out into the world, as the phrase would go, nilly-willy, without a sense of connection, only adds to the chaos of our life. It adds to the frustration. So we always want to connect before we try to correct anything. And so whether you're a parent, whether you're a godparent, whether you are an employer, whether you are an employee, whether you're an artist, whatever your lot in life is in terms of your particular skill and talent and creative urgency within you, you want to have some sense of connection before you just move into the world of expression. And that way, what you bring forth is coming directly from a level of coherence with intelligence and order and harmony and peace and love and beauty, not just trying to make something happen, you see. So I invite you in this moment to close the outer eyes, to turn within, to extract your attention from the world of effects and circumstances, situations, people, places, and things, and come within into your interiority, your inner awareness. The light of your attention is not shining outward. Allow the light of your attention to shine inward. Notice that the body's breathing. Notice the mood, the thoughts that are going through your sky of mind. And become increasingly aware that you are pure awareness, shining the light of awareness on mood, attitude, thoughts, and perceptions that you sometimes unconsciously just shine into the world, but not now. We look at the mood we may be in, our attitude we may be carrying, thought forms that may be emerging, emotions that may be arising, and with intention to connect to the great presence that is never an absence, called by millions of names, with an intention to have a realization of our oneness with this presence of love, beauty, intelligence. We sit and we allow all that which is within the mind to come to pass, to just pass on through our awareness as we observe it without intervention. Said more and more and more, we are becoming aware that we are awareness. And that which is passing through, if it's anxiety, if it's worry, if it's frustration, fear, it's now being achemicalized. Alchemy is happening through our intention and through our observation. So that those thought forms, moods, and attitudes are being transmuted into higher frequencies because of observation and intention, connection and then vibrational correction. Be still and know this for a moment. Be aware you're sitting with thousands of people, creating a vibratory field of coherence around our oneness with life, which is love, which is intelligence, which is beauty. And all that is unlike this, produced by limited perception, is now being transmuted by intention and observation. The three keys: stillness, silence, and solitude. We've become still, silent, and we're in our fortress of solitude, witnessing the passing events in the mind without attachment. True change and transformation is happening now. We give thanks for this and allow it to be so. And so it is. As you slowly open your eyes, now move into flow motion, allowing your connection to compel you into right thought, right speech, and right action. Blessings. As always, presently, we have two sponsors to Take Back Your Mind podcast. One is Adaptozen. The sponsor is Neutralize. Adaptozen is an aspect of Neutralize. We have superfood greens, and we have the vitamin D3, K2. The immune system is very important, and the energy circuits of your body are very important to be able to carry more cosmic energy. So you want to have your spiritual practice that keeps you in homeostasis, not acidic, but your pH balance is wonderful, and then you want to have right supplementation to assist in that process. Go to Neutralize.com, tap on Adaptozen, and get your bundle. The other sponsor is always the Agape International Spiritual Center, now going into its 37th year. Go to AgapeLive.com. There you'll find a plethora of ways to tap into the community. You can tap into it every Sunday for our Way of Meditation service. Our second service of the day is at 8:30 a.m. for meditation, 9 o'clock a.m. for the Worship Celebration Fellowship service. The third service, of course, is 11 a.m. meditation, 11:30 fellowship service. Go to the website, agapelive.com. There are daily meditations, daily prayer times. So much is happening in this community. Those are our two sponsors that we give thanks for. Have a bright day. Your time is very valuable, so I want to thank you for lending us your ear and participating in taking back your mind. If you want to submit a question for the question of the week, please submit it to podcast@michaelbeckwith.com. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, please submit a review and let us know your thoughts. Stay on top of current episodes by subscribing to the podcast so that you'll receive alerts and not miss one single episode. And feel free to share this podcast with all of your friends and family. And until we meet again, take back your mind, and you will take back your life. Peace and blessings.